She has 3 hours to reach a man who could have her killed on sight. Alexandria is under enemy occupation. The harbor is blockaded. Her own brother has soldiers watching every road into the palace, waiting for her. And yet somehow, before the night is over, she will be standing face to face with the most powerful general in the world, inside his own quarters, past his own guards, and he will not know how she got there until she is already speaking. She is 21 years old. History will spend the next 2,000 years arguing about what kind of woman does this. A schemer, a seductress, a queen with nothing left to lose. But the truth, as it usually is quieter and far more remarkable than the legend, because the woman rolled into that carpet wasn't gambling on her beauty. She was gambling on being the only person in the room who could outthink everyone in it. Welcome back to HistoLingo. If you're new here, this is where we sit with the stories history rushed past, the real ones, not the postcards. Today, we are talking about Cleopatra. Her full name was Cleopatra VII, the last in a long line of Greek-descended rulers who had governed Egypt for nearly 300 years, ever since one of Alexander the Great's own generals claimed the throne. By the time she was born in 69 BC, that dynasty was rotting from the inside. Her father bribed his way onto the throne. Her siblings would spend their lives trying to kill each other for it. Cleopatra grew up watching family dinners double as assassination rehearsals, but she also grew up doing something none of her ancestors had ever bothered to do. She learned Egyptian. For nearly 3 centuries, the Ptolemies had ruled Egypt without speaking a word of the language of the people they ruled. They stayed Greek, stayed separate, stayed foreign on purpose. Cleopatra broke that pattern completely. She reportedly spoke 9 languages fluently: Egyptian, Ethiopian, Hebrew, Arabic, Syriac, Median, Parthian, and others. And she was the first of her line to address her own people in their own tongue, in their own temples, as a living embodiment of the goddess Isis. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should, because everything that came after, Caesar, Antony, the empire she nearly built, started with a young woman who understood something her whole family had missed. Power isn't just holding a throne. It's being understood by the people standing beneath it. She took that throne at 18, co-ruling with her younger brother, as custom demanded. It lasted less than 3 years before he had her forced out of the capital entirely. By 48 BC, Cleopatra was in exile, raising a mercenary army in the desert, trying to claw back a kingdom that had been hers by right. And into the middle of that unfinished civil war walked a Roman general named Julius Caesar, chasing his own rival Pompey, who had just been murdered on Egyptian shores as a peace offering from Cleopatra's brother. Caesar didn't come to Alexandria for Cleopatra. He came to collect on old Roman debts and settle a war that wasn't his. But Cleopatra understood something instantly that her brother's advisors never grasped. Whoever got to Caesar first and made the better case would win Egypt. There was just one problem. Her brother's forces controlled the palace, controlled the harbor, controlled every entrance a queen might use to reach the most powerful man in the Mediterranean. So she didn't use an entrance at all. Here's the detail almost every retelling gets wrong. It likely wasn't a carpet she was smuggled in on. Ancient sources say it was a simple bed sack, a common cargo sailors used to move goods without questions asked, less glamorous than the legend, and far more telling. Cleopatra wasn't interested in a grand entrance. She was interested in results. She had herself carried past the guards, unrolled in front of Caesar, and began speaking before he'd even had time to ask who she was. Within a day, she had an alliance. Within a year, she had her throne back, a son, and the undivided attention of Rome's most powerful man. What followed wasn't a fling. It was a partnership between two of the shrewdest political minds of the ancient world, and Rome watched it with open unease. Cleopatra came to Rome itself, was received as a visiting head of state, and stood as a living reminder that Egypt's wealth, its grain, its gold, its centuries of accumulated power, now had a direct line to Caesar's ear. Then, in 44 BC, Caesar was murdered on the floor of the Senate, and Cleopatra, pregnant with his heir only in name, was suddenly a foreign queen with a very famous, very inconvenient connection to a dead dictator, and no protector left in Rome at all. What she didn't yet know was that Rome itself was about to fracture into civil war again, and that the next man to walk into her life would either finish what Caesar started or destroy everything she had built to survive. That man was Mark Antony. Their first meeting in 41 BC was staged with theatrical precision. Cleopatra sailed to meet him on a barge with gilded decks and purple sails, dressed as Aphrodite, and let Antony come to her instead of the other way around. It worked exactly as intended, but what kept Antony was not the spectacle. It was the same thing that had kept Caesar, a mind that could match his ambition step for step, and a kingdom rich enough to fund it. Together, they built something unprecedented, a joint vision of an East and West ruled in partnership, their children granted titles across 3 continents. To Rome, watching from a distance, it looked less like romance and more like a threat to the Republic itself. Antony's rival back home, a young man named Octavian, made sure everyone saw it that was, by 31 BC, it wasn't diplomacy deciding Cleopatra's fate anymore. It was a fleet of ships facing Octavian's navy at a place called Actium, and no one on either side yet knew which empire would still exist by the following year. Cleopatra and Antony lost. Their combined forces were outmaneuvered at sea. Their army abandoned them on land soon after, and within a year, Octavian's forces stood at the gates of Alexandria itself, the city Cleopatra had spent her whole life trying to protect. Antony died first by his own hand on false word that Cleopatra had already taken her own life. When he learned the truth, he was already dying in her arms. Cleopatra had one card left to play, and she knew it. Octavian wanted her alive, paraded through Rome in chains, proof of his total victory, the final humiliation of a fallen queen. She had spent her entire reign refusing to be anyone's ornament. She wasn't going to become one now. On August 12th, 30 BC, Cleopatra died in her palace by poison. Historians still debate whether it truly came from an asp or from a prepared toxin she'd studied for years in anticipation of exactly this moment. Either way, the choice was hers, made on her own terms, in the one room in the world still fully under her control. For 2,000 years afterward, Rome told her story for her, as a temptress, a cautionary tale, a foreign danger to good Roman men. It was a story written entirely by the empire that had beaten her, and it stuck, because the winners almost always get to write it. But go back to that young woman learning Egyptian as a girl, addressing her people not as a distant Greek monarch, but as one of their own. And a different Cleopatra comes into focus. Not a woman who charmed her way into power, a ruler who understood, earlier and more clearly than almost anyone around her, that real power is never just about being feared. It's about being understood. She spoke 9 languages. Rome only ever bothered to translate one story about her. If there's something in that worth sitting with, how easily a life gets reduced to the version that's easiest to tell. That's exactly why stories like Cleopatra's belong on this channel. History remembers the myth quickly and the person slowly, and the slow version is almost always the one worth hearing. If this one stayed with you, consider subscribing to HistoLingo. There's another life like hers waiting to be told next week. And if you've got a story you think deserves the same treatment, tell us who in the comments.